if you look at the healthcare industry, I mean, why digital health is so popular and so attractive amongst the entrepreneurs, and one of the reasons for that is like there is a lot of investment happening in this space. Maybe the investment in other sectors is like really declining, but then in the healthcare space, the statistics shows that in 2018, almost $6.5 billion got invested, and 28% of those deals were having an average investment size of $5 million, which is amazing. What's your opinion about it? I mean, you guys are coming across similar opportunities from the market. Maybe I'll go with Javier, yourself first.
Yeah, I think that when we look at healthcare, I think we all agree that it's not a sustainable system as it is today. So I think that while comparing it with other segments, like let's say consumer electronics, where a lot of the products is a nice to have, it's something that you can decide, do I want it, do I not want it? In healthcare, we're looking at situations where people do not get their health that they need, they don't get the care that they need, or they do not get the prevention possibilities they would like to have. So I think that we're facing an area where it has to be invested in, it's not an option, and I think that makes it very exciting, and the traction is still going on.
Ajay, you have any views?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at what's happened over the last 10 years, right? Technology has an adoption curve that is exponential, and healthcare hasn't caught up. And so what you're seeing, money is being poured in for healthcare to actually catch up and take the technology that's already existing and out there and implement it into our healthcare system. I'll give you a slight example. Walk into an OR today, and you'll see a 1970s, 80s technology that's all disparate, and nothing talks to each other, and data can't be shared across platform. And think about the things that we can do as a human race, but if we can't have basic systems talking to each other in a hospital, then there's something missing. And so I think you're seeing the money go into it to fix these issues, right? Instead of being a reactive healthcare system, to become a proactive healthcare system. And so the money's gonna follow where there's an opportunity, and there's a huge opportunity to actually help how we take care of ourselves.
So from your perspective, since you represent the Asia side of the funds, do you see this kind of a trend also in that segment of the world?
I'll actually qualify that with a number. You mentioned 6.5 billion. What we read from Rock Health was that US spent invested about 8-ish billion in 2018. Whereas Asia, only HealthTech, the investments were about 6.5 billion. So if you're saying that in US it was 6.5, it's actually equal. Then the data that I had for the first quarter of 2019, it was actually equal in both cases. So arguably, Asia is actually the second largest market for health tech investments that's going on. I'll tell you the reason why. Because specifically in Asia, where it's growth markets right now, and the gap between the infrastructure resources on one side versus the number of people who need healthcare is just so big that you need to think out of box and have force multiplier sort of technologies which can disrupt traditional ways in which we sort of take healthcare to people. And that's exactly why money is being poured into those. So if done rightly and having disproportionate scale, you can actually make this money, to put this money to use and get a return on investment.
So as you raised the point about disruption, and typically we can also see here that today Divya from Samsung was here, and we see the likes of Apple and the likes of Samsung and the likes of Google, who were never conventionally the healthcare player, right? I mean, in this type of conferences that I'm a part of, these conferences for last now more than 10 years, I see there are new entrants coming to this horizon. Like the likes of Medtronic, the likes of Samsung, the likes of J&J, they're always there, they're always leading the space. But then suddenly, over the last 8 to 10 years, you see a lot of new entrants jumping into this space. They are bringing the new ideas. They are not bringing this is what happens kind of attitude, right? They bring completely new perspective. They go completely tangential to these approaches. Has that also impacted in terms of the opportunities that are getting created in this whole entrepreneurial ecosystem of the digital healthcare? Because the digital healthcare, as conventionally, was heavily dominated by whatever J&J will bring out as innovation, whatever the Medtronic will bring out as innovation, whatever Stryker will bring out as innovation. But then you see these people coming in, they bring in mobility platforms, they bring in iWatches of the world, and they bring in a lot of apps-based patient care. So what's your opinion, Ajay? I mean, you representing J&J, it's very interesting for us to know that are these players really creating a significant disruption in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be done by one player alone. I'll start there, and I'll say that if you look at the trend of the industry, right, so you'll see that the Verale's of the world, right, Google and Verale and what they're doing, they're partnering. Their models are partnering. How do they bring technology to people that understand the industry, that understand how the hospitals run, and how do you work together to solve the issues that we all face as an industry? So you'll see that, right? Google's done that. J&J and Google got together and did Verb Surgical, trying to fix the OR. Then you'll see, other spaces where Apple is partnering with a number of players in the space with their iWatch, right? So yeah, the disruption's there. They're coming. They're doing what's right. They're trying to push human healthcare. But I think it's going to take a combination effort, and that's what we've realized. So our model is about partnering. I think Javier spoke about the same thing earlier. It's about partnering and working together to solve the issues that our healthcare system faces.
Sure. So you have any thoughts on this, Seemant?
One comment was that I think why that's also happening is because over time we've seen that inside out kind of innovation has slowed down things because things were based on a certain process which came out with great outcomes. But that's kind of slowed down. But out there, there are a whole bunch of startups which are more nimble, faster, and are willing to take that risk to see whether they get in that outside-in perspective and it still fits in. Of course, that leads to a lot of innovations which have not been thought through whether they fit in the clinical pathways. But at the same time, they're getting in some innovations which actually bring the outside-in view, which is faster and sometimes better than what's coming out from the traditional innovators out there.
So I would add, there's often a misconception that we are all, that tech and pharma is fighting for the same space. While if you think about a company like Bayer, we've been around for 153 years now. Our capabilities are very clear, and it has never been the IT. It has never been a data management. We do grow in that spaces, but it's not our interest to have those capabilities at the level that Google or Apple could have it. So I think that in the future it's about coming together in joint ventures, trying to fix that problem of the healthcare system with both capabilities together. I don't think there's so much of a fight as it is a cooperation.
Yeah. So, this essentially opens up another challenge, right? Because, these people who are representing the healthcare investment world, that partnerships with respect to the likes of Apples and Googles are talked about. But then there are lots of audiences that we have here today who are strong entrepreneurs. They may not have the healthcare background, but they may come from, work for Cisco for a few years and then happen to see some episode with a family member in the hospital, and they say, hey, you know what? This is an inefficiency that I have observed. I want to work on that. So they come up with a concept. That concept is great. Their presentation looks nice. Their product demonstration looks nice. But since the healthcare system being so complex, unless and until you align yourself with a payer or a provider, and you become a part of that whole ecosystem, your product just doesn't get sold. If your product doesn't get sold, nobody's going to invest in your company, right? I mean, what do you think about this as a egg chicken situation? And I know you have that initiative, and that's why I wanted to refer it to you,
right.
Javier.
Yeah, thank you.
How do you help these early concept innovators or disruptors
I think
provide them this platform?
I think what I've observed in the last years, so we have a partnership program which is focusing in different levels of maturity of startups. You could be a startup that just has an excellent idea, but you don't have a minimal viable product, or you don't know how to take it to market. That's what we call the growth part. In the growth part, you'll get from Bayer, if you get selected, $100,000 funding, and the possibility of being 4 months with us in Berlin in the headquarters, trying to figure out how do we bring that to market. So it's us helping you to grow. On the other side, we have, for more mature startups, we have what we call the advanced track. That would be, let us sit together. If you're a selected company in the advanced track, let's figure out how a co-creation business looks like, and establish those licenses together, or that statement of work together to go on here. I think one point I would like to make is, so we're open for applications once a year, which the applications will be closing on the 31st of May. So I would really recommend you to go at the G4A website, have a look at our health challenges, which is the main challenges that the healthcare system is facing, and see if you have a good fit there and just apply.
Yeah, that's great. I think, many of you who were actually putting your questions on me, I'm not the right guy, he's the right guy. So go and talk to him. You have got opportunities at an early stage. But then, Ajay, what's your opinion? I mean, how do you guys help the early stage entrepreneurs?
So I think, we have multiple arms of J&J to help early entrepreneurs, right? So J&J Innovation broadly has multiple arms. We have our innovation centers, which sit in San Francisco, Boston, London, and Shanghai. And they're looking at early stage research collaborations, early stage licensing deals, and how do we work together to prove your proof of concept, right? Get to the point where you get a proof of concept, it's proved, and then you can keep moving on. And then you have, the venture arm, which probably takes in that growth phase that Javier is talking about. So we help companies, we invest into companies, take an equity, take a board seat, potentially, depending on the deal, the structure of the deal, and then we move on, right? And we're there as a financial investor, but we also, our money's not just green, right? So if we come in as your investor, you have 140,000 employees behind you, right? And so if you run into a regulatory concept that you want to run by, we have experts in-house. If you're looking at a clinical trials design, we have experts in-house. So we like to bring more than just our money. And then obviously we have our BD arm, right? So anything late stage. But what I'll tell everyone out here is where I see a lot of growth stage companies and a lot of health tech companies start to struggle is, and I think you heard this in the consumer pathway as well, it's about finding the care continuum and how you fit in that care pathway. And I think the easiest example to relate to is if I told you 10 years ago that a random guy is going to pull up in a car and you're going to hop in and that's your taxi, you would have looked at me like I'm crazy. And Uber came, it's a good day to talk about them, right, their IPO, they came into the market and they slowly released technology into the market. And so they started in a traditional pathway. They started with black cars and taxis. And then they moved into something that was disruptive, right? Can we disrupt that industry? And I'm saying in the same way in healthcare, right? You're not going to come in and get someone to believe that algorithms and AI are going to determine your life or death situation. So you've got to look at the care continuum pathway. How am I going to work with the care continuum pathway and eventually disrupt it completely? So I think that's something to think about as you as entrepreneurs continue to move forward.
Yeah.
I think I'll just build on that.
Sure.
2 points. One was that fitment into the clinical pathway, and that too, sooner the better, because then you're building on something that will be adopted by actually the point of prescription, and that correlates to sales. The second part is the business model itself, thinking it sort of well in time, and how to then scale it is the other part, because in healthcare what we've seen is I think scale is the biggest problem in terms of even if you have a great product, a great innovation, if you don't get the business model right, it doesn't scale. So if you're able to think of it, and I'll just refer to one example, if you have a point of care diagnostic and you're actually, which is a company that we invested in, it gives you your lipid profiles and your sugar results at the point of care under 6 minutes. But here's where we're doing, we're putting it in a pharmacy chain, which is 3,000 pharmacies. So you don't need to think of a pharmacy as a brick and mortar infrastructure which dispenses medications. You can actually think of it as a lab. Today there are 5 tests and you get the result under 6 minutes. Tomorrow there'll be 15 tests and you can do it right there. So it becomes a lab cum pharmacy out there. And then close the loop with the doc by doing the virtual consult. Mm-hmm. And this we actually launched 4 years back in Apollo, where those guys are doing virtual consults, about 10,000 virtual consults, using the macro fundamental factors like smartphone penetration in India.
Yeah.
So things are changing.
Absolutely. In fact, that opens up another topic, right? I mean, when somebody is thinking about doing something in the healthcare industry, many of the times the entrepreneurs happen to land on that thought process of making a change in the diagnostic space. Many of the time we actually think of an idea which improves the diagnostic capabilities. And that's the problem, because as soon as it improves the diagnostic capabilities, from the investor's perspective, you are actually looking at this as a diagnostic device which is going to bring FDA in the picture, and that's going to delay all your business plans and your projections. So you eventually become a risky company from the investment's perspective. So how do you think, from the diagnostics to therapeutics to digital health to workflow optimization, efficiency improvement, what is kind of a spectrum that from your perspective you give an importance when some proposal come to you? I mean, what's your sweet spot versus what you think, hey, I hit this?
I would recommend that. I've seen a lot of startups coming with a great technological idea. I would recommend that every person hooks up that within a narrative that actually anchors itself on the size of the opportunity and the size of the value pool. This is something, if you ask any payers, let's pick up the continuum, since we were talking about the continuum of care, something like cardiovascular. So we understand how stroke works, we understand how heart failure works, we understand that there's some precursors, it could be something like diabetes. So when you're gonna provide a solution, where is that big bubble of the value pool? So where is it that a payer, if he has one desire, he would like to fix? It said, and then where do you act? I could act by saying, I'm gonna have a solution on the heart failure space, but I could also say, I'm gonna have a solution on the diabetes to avoid people going to heart failure. So I think the understanding of all these connections and looking where is the biggest value pool in the healthcare system, that's essential for understanding the priorities.
Great.
So from our landscape, look, I don't think there's one area that we're saying we're going to invest into and only like we're broadly based across the board. But what I think it comes to at the end of the day is simply how are you going to change the outcome, right? So we are happy to, we actually like products that are going through FDA pathways. There's IP and everything along that comes alongside of it, and it's a hurdle for everyone else to climb and get over. But what I'll tell you is change the outcome. If you have a diagnostic test and it's really not going to, it tells me something a couple minutes faster, it tells me, but at the end of the day, the outcome and the care pathway doesn't change because of it, that's hard to invest in. But if you're going to tell me that, hey, I got a diagnostic tool and it's going to get to saving X amount of patients faster, or we're going to get an answer so much faster that we're going to have the ability to intervene significantly faster, that's a different story. And I think that's where you have to look at it. How do you change the outcome for the patient? And if you change the outcome, the money will come, right? If you have an ability to do that, the money will come.
Great. So I think this is where I would like to stop and open it up for questions from your side in case you've got any other questions, so that our experts can talk about it. Yes, please.
That can help with lowering the drug prices, or have you seen any of your peers do that? Are you seeing any trends? Because you actually have wind at your back with the government really pushing to do that, which you don't see that in healthcare very much.
So I'll take a shot at it. Yeah, so the answer is yes, right? I'll put it out there, right? So J&J was the first to come out and say we're gonna disclose our drug pricings before, and made it public before any of our peers did and before it was mandated by Congress. We also took the extra step and said we'll go ahead and start listing our prices onto commercials before it getting mandated. So we feel like we're at the forefront of it. We are looking at ways overall. Look, I believe that as we get smarter from a technology perspective, the cost to develop a drug should come down, and that should overall help the overall system.
Yeah, so I would add only, I fully agree, and I think that I would recommend always when, of course, we all want those prices to go down. It is an interplay between being able to afford the research pipeline and having a good research pipeline for the next 15 years and financing that with the price of the current drugs. So I think we always need to be sensitive to that, but I think technology might be the answer for lowering those prices. Also, the integrated health concept where the drug by itself is less efficient than the drug with something else, the drug plus, and I think that is a path that we want to explore with technology.
So we have one question from this end.
Hi. So you've spoken a lot about drugs and diagnostics. Do you guys, how is the space in medical devices from an investment perspective?
Yeah, so I actually specifically invest in medical devices, and I'll tell you this. So I think over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a number of entrants come into the medical device space that typically weren't medical device investors. So if you probably went back to 2008, 2009, when the overall market went through a depression, a lot of people exited the medical device space because you don't have that, that what I'll call the J curve that big pharma does or tech does. So there weren't a lot of exits in the space, and so a lot of money disappeared. But what we've seen over the last, call it 3 to 4 years, as with tech being enabled, tech-enabled devices has brought a lot of money back into the pool. So what I'll tell you is we've seen a lot of new funds being created. We've seen that are specifically focused on medical devices. There's a lot out there. So I'm optimistic about the future. Now, obviously, there's macroeconomic effects that could happen here, and then in the near future, and we're seeing some of the destabilization of that right now. But there's money out there, funds are being raised, and so for at least the next 3 or 4 years, you'll still see a good amount of money still going into medical devices.
I'll just add on that. I think on medical devices, like he said, there's a thin line now. It's blurring, and in fact it's blurred between devices, diagnostics, and digital health. So you don't have dumbed out devices. You have connected devices which flick the data up on the cloud. You get AI to process that data and churn out something that's actionable. And you've got the digital health platforms which basically close the loop with the doc or the patient. So that's where the money is actually coming back, because then it becomes a digital health play, not just a device.
Excellent. So thank you so much. Many thanks to audiences for being here, and thank you so much to the panel. It has been a great experience working with you guys, and I'm sure that you will find some of our entrepreneurs who can add a value in your ecosystem, and I'm sure that you can rely upon their expertise and their ecosystems to actually fuel your own entrepreneurship attempts. And if there is anything that we can, as a tie, can breach between the entrepreneurs and the investors, feel free. We are always there to support you. Thank you so much.